Hello and welcome back to part 2 at the circus. I can only record so much at a time on my phone. So this is part 2. You can go to part 1 or join us in part 2. We're at the circus with Pippi. Can you imagine what that's like? Okay, so here we go. Are you sitting comfortably? Good. Away we go. So, meanwhile, the next act had begun. It was Miss Elvira about to walk the tightrope. She wore a pink tutu and carried a pink parasol in her hand. And with delicate little steps, she probably didn't do that because she was on a tightrope. She probably went like this. Balance, balance, balance. With delicate little steps, she ran out onto the rope. Woo! She swung her legs very gracefully in the air, woo, and did all kinds of tricks. She showed how she could walk backward on the narrow rope. But when she got back to the little platform at the end of the rope, who do you think was standing on the platform? Pippi! Pippi was standing on the platform, and Pippi said, "That was fantastic! What are you going to do now?" Well, Miss Elvira looked completely astonished, which made Pippi laugh. And Miss Elvira was so shocked, she said nothing at all, but she jumped down from the rope and scurried down the ladder and stood at the bottom to gaze up at Pippi, who of course was looking very confidently and waving at the audience, who by now already knew her because she had been bareback horse riding in the first act. And now she was going to be tightrope walking. So the audience were cheering for her. So the ringmaster sent for the guards to throw Pippi out of the circus. But all the people started to shout, "Let her stay! Let her stay! We want to see Pippi! Let her stay! Let her stay!" And they all stamped their feet and clapped their hands. So Pippi ran out onto the rope. Well, Miss Elvira's tricks were nothing compared to Pippi's tricks. When she got to the middle of the rope, she stretched one leg high up in the air, and her big shoe spread over her head like a roof. Balancing on one leg with her big shoe above her head like a roof. She bent her foot a little so she could tickle herself behind the ear. Tickle, 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 tickle. And then she set the rope swinging back and forth and back and forth and back and forth while she was balanced on one leg with her shoe tickling her ear, until she was fast enough that she could swing up into the air, did a somersault, did another somersault, poof. And where do you think she landed? She landed on the back of the very grumpy ringmaster. He was not happy at all. He was so shocked and also kind of frightened that he started to run around the ring with Pippi on his back. And Pippi was cheering to the crowd as she ran around on the back of the ringmaster. And she was saying, "Oh, what a jolly horse! What a jolly horse! But why do you not have any pom-poms in your hair, Mr. Ringmaster?" Now, Pippi decided it was time to go back to Tommy and Annika because the ringmaster was really sounding very grumpy. So off she hopped, and the ringmaster just ran out of the ring. He totally did not know how to handle the situation at all. So she landed back in her seat, and the ringmaster ran out because the next act was going to begin. So there was a brief pause while the ringmaster composed himself, straightened his hat, had a glass of water, and came back into the ring. Oh, and he combed his hair. No pom-poms in that hair. Okay, when he came back in, he bowed to the audience and he said, "People of the circus, in a moment you will be privileged to see the greatest marvel of all time." I've lost my place on the page. Where are we? Greatest marvel of all time. There you are. You will meet the strongest man in the world, the mighty Marcel. And the crowd went wild. And the ringmaster went on, "Whom no one yet has been able to defeat. And here he comes." And the crowd went wild again. Allow me to... Oh, just one moment. I keep losing the page. I would be a terrible, terrible ringmaster. One moment. And here he is, the mighty Marcel. He's over there, the mighty Marcel. And the crowd went wild again, and in came the mighty Marcel. He stepped into the ring, and he looked as big as a giant. He probably could reach the tightrope all by himself without a ladder. He wore red tights and a big gold belt around his stomach. He bowed to the audience. He looked very pleased with himself. That's my muscle. That's Marcel's muscle. This is Marcel's muscle, the mighty Marcel's muscles. And the crowd went wild. "Look at those muscles," said the ringmaster, and he squeezed the mighty Marcel's arm. It didn't make that sound, but that would be funny if his muscle made the sound of a car horn. Although that sounds more like a rooster who's very tired. So, and now I have a very special invitation for you. Who will challenge the mighty Marcel in a wrestling match? Which one of you dares to try the strength against the world's strongest man? Any of you out there want to test your strength? I will give you $100 for anyone who can defeat the great mighty Marcel. Think of that. Who will be the first to try it? Nobody stepped forward. And Pippi, who had been looking at the ceiling and eating popcorn and enjoying watching all the people, hadn't really been listening, and she said, What did he say? And Tommy said, "He says that anybody who can wrestle the mighty Marcel to the ground will have $100 prize." Pippi said, "Well, I can. But I think it would be too bad because you know what? He looks like such a nice person, and I don't know if wrestling him to the ground would be a very nice thing to do." And Annika said, No, you couldn't, Pippi. He's the strongest man in the world. And Pippi said, yep, man, yes, but I am the strongest girl in the world. Remember that? Meanwhile, the mighty Marcel was lifting heavy iron weights and bending thick iron rods in the middle to show how strong he was. I need one more little drink. Just 1 second. That's my circus tea. Oh, come now, cried the ringmaster. Is there really nobody here who wants to try to beat the mighty Marcel? And he waved the $100 bill in the air. Oh dear, said the ringmaster. Will I be forced to keep this money to myself? And with that, Pippi jumped up on the side of the circus ring and said, excuse me, no, you certainly won't be forced to do that. And she stepped over the railing into the ring. The ringmaster was absolutely wild with shock and horror when he saw who had stepped forward. And he looked not very friendly, and Pippi said, why do you always have to be so unfriendly, Mr. Ringmaster? I'm just going to test my strength against the mighty Marcel like you asked. And the ringmaster said, well, this is no place for jokes. You should leave the ring, little girl. You are nothing in strength compared to the mighty Marcel. But Pippi went right up to the ringleader and right up to the mighty Marcel, put her hands on her hips, looked at them both, and then took Mr. Mighty Marcel's hand and shook it very heartily. And she said, pleased to meet you, mighty Marcel. My name is Pippi Longstocking, and I would like to test my strength against you, for I am the strongest girl in the world. The mighty Marcel looked down and blinked, for he had nothing to reply. And Pippi said, okay, that settles that. In 1 minute, I will begin. And began she did. She grabbed the mighty Marcel around the waist, and before anyone knew what was happening, kaboof, she had thrown him down onto the mat. The mighty Marcel leapt up. His face was bright red. And Tommy and Annika were shrieking, yeah, go, Pippi, go. And all the people in the circus, whoa, whoa, go, Pippi, go, go. They had all jumped to their feet, and now they were all shouting, go, Pippi, go, Pippi, go, Pippi, which made the mighty Marcel even grumpier, and the ringmaster even grumpier. And with that, Pippi rushed at the mighty Marcel and caught him around the waist again, and kaboof, down he went onto the mat. Yay! The crowd went wild. And she stood her ground because she wanted to have a little bit of a challenge and not beat him too easily. She stood with her hands on her hips, and the mighty Marcel lumbered up, poof, 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 got his muscles ready, and he charged at Pippi. He stood very strong on her hips, and he tried to grab her round the waist and throw her down onto the ground, but she stood poof, solid as a rock, for she was the strongest girl in the world, don't forget. And then Pippi said to him, mighty Marcel, you can do better than that. And she then wriggled out of his grasp and with a twinkling of an eye, kaboof, Mighty Marcel was down on the mat again, and Pippi stood beside him, waiting for him to get up. He roared, "Rah!" and he rushed at her. And Pippi just said, "Tiddly-pom, piddly-day, tiddly-pom, piddly-day." And the crowd were going, "Pippi, Pippi, Pippi." And there was nothing that Mighty Marcel could do to get Pippi down onto the mat. All the people were stamping their feet and they were throwing their hats in the air. And then when the Mighty Marcel came rushing at her for the last time, sorry, Pippi just picked him up. She lifted him high into the air with her arms straight above her head and showed him to the crowd, and then carried him clear out of the ring. Twiddly-tom, diddly-day, and all the crowd were cheering. And then she just put him gently, kaboof, on the rug outside of the ring. And there he sat, looking very grumpy. "Now, little fellow," she said to Mighty Marcel, "I don't think we'll bother about this anymore. We'll never have any more fun than we've already had, and thank you very much for trying so hard to beat me, but I am the strongest girl in the entire world. You had no chance." And then the audience were shouting, "Pippi is the winner! Pippi is the winner! Pippi is the winner! Pippi is the winner!" And Mighty Marcel went back to his trailer. And the ringmaster had to go up and hand Pippi the $100. Although he looked as if he'd much prefer to run away too with Mighty Marcel. And he said, "Here you are, here's the $100. And Pippi said, "I don't want that old piece of paper. I don't want that old money. You take that, Mr. Ringmaster, and buy extra food for all of the beautiful horses in your circus." And she went back to her seat, while the crowd still cheered. And she said, "This certainly is a long circus. I think I'll need to take a little snooze, but wake me up if anybody else needs my help." And with that, she lay back in her chair and went to sleep. And there she lay and snored while the clowns and the jugglers and the acrobats did their tricks and made magic and laughter for all of the audience, and Tommy and Annika loved it. They all cheered and clapped while Pippi kept sleeping. And then Tommy said to Annika, "What a fabulous day." And he gazed at Pippi and he said to her, "Just the same, I think Pippi was the best act of all." And Annika agreed. And that is where I'm finishing the chapter on Pippi goes to the circus and beats the strongest man in the world. And thank you for flying in on your trapeze. I hope you have some popcorn left. And we will see where and what will Pippi do tomorrow. Bye.